Good day. This is Terry Holmes from VMS Software. We are delighted to have you with us today for the VMS Software webinar, whose topics include an update to our x86 product, topics and updates on various open source issues, as well as some other things. We are delighted that you are able to attend, and we appreciate your attendance at this webinar. I can tell you that, as with most of our webinars, we have people all around the globe who are attending today. So thank you, especially for those who are staying up late or getting up early. We very much appreciate that. This is our 15th webinar overall, and this is part of a continuing series here in 2021 specific to talk about the upcoming release of our x86 product. Speaking of getting up early, we are delighted that our guest speaker and presenter today is Dr. Brett Cameron. Brett is the VSI Chief Solutions Officer, and he's going to be talking on various topics. And the comment about getting up early, where he is located in New Zealand, it is rather early in the morning. So Brett, we appreciate you getting up and going through this presentation with us. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and after Brett's presentation, we will have, as we always do, questions and answer session that you can enter in on the chat box or in the Q&A box. Thank you, and we'll turn it over to you, Brett.
Okay, thanks, Terry. So you know, I guess the number of questions that we get will be a function of how quickly I get to bed, but we'll see how we go. So anyway, I think this is probably the third webinar this year, the others having been given by Claire Grant, our CTO, and John Reagan, who of course heads up the compiler team. This webinar is probably not going to be quite so technical, and it's probably going to bounce around a few topics. I want to start off by just talking a little bit about the path to 9.2, the roadmap that we're on, go into some detail about what you can expect between now and the advent of the 9.2 production release. I want to make a brief mention of migration in the context of migrating to x86, and we'll also talk a little bit about some newish things. I mean, that will cover a range of different products and so forth that we've been working on. The emphasis here is I kind of want to show that whilst obviously getting 9.2 across the line is very much our primary focus, you know, we are working on some other things, and we're also thinking beyond 9.2. Where do we go with OpenVMS once we have 9.2 available and in great shape? So let's make a start. So obviously the big news in recent times was the release of OpenVMS 9.1 at the end of June. This is a very major milestone for us, and 9.1 is of course available to all of our customers, our support customers, and partners and ISVs and so forth. It's available for download for you to use and find issues and tell us about those problems and to start porting your applications and so forth. So like I said, we'll look in a little bit more detail about what's in this 9.1 release and what you can expect to see going forward as we move on towards 9.2. But like I say, there are other things that we've been working on as well as 9.1. There are some new open source products or new versions of open source products. There are various other projects and initiatives going on which I'd like to talk briefly about. So we'll see how we go. Okay, so the path to 9.2. So if you look at the squiggly line here, which starts off in the first half of last year, H1 2020, we released the 9.0 EAK, the first version of OpenVMS that was available to a subset of users for the x86 platform. And over time, we released a number of versions of 9.0 incremental releases up to 9.0H, which was released in the first half earlier this year. After releasing 9.0H, we worked on the 8.42 L3 release for Itanium, and then very much focused our attention on getting the 9.1 release out at the end of June, which we have now done. So where we are now is essentially where the little yellow box is. We've got 9.1 out the door and available, as I say, to customers and partners and ISVs. And we've released one 9.1 update kit that was released earlier this month, and there'll be another update kit planned for around the mid-August timeframe. These update kits include fixes that we've identified and issues, of course, that you've found during your testing of 9.1. There will then, in the second half of 2021, probably around the September timeframe, there will be a 9.1a EAK, which will obviously include all of the fixes to that point and various additional features, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail in subsequent slides. From then on, we're steaming towards 9.2 release at the end of the year, full production release at the end of the year. So things I think are tracking pretty well on that timeline. There are no obvious issues. I'm sure that there's always potential for something to come out of the woodwork, but at the moment I think we're looking very good for achieving that timeline. So in terms of 9.1 and what to expect, well, if you've downloaded 9.1 and started using it, you probably don't need to read the slide. But the intent with 9.1 was to include the various items that I've listed here on the slide. We had hoped to get bare metal support in for the DL380, Gen 9 and Gen 10, some fairly specific configurations. Unfortunately, that didn't quite make the initial 9.1 release due to some work that needed to be done with some of the device drivers. I'm happy to say that these matters have now been resolved, so we should have that bare metal support available to you in fairly short order. Another significant change with the 9.1 release, you'll recall if you used any of the 9.0 releases that we provided those essentially as an appliance that you could spin up within Oracle VirtualBox or another such hypervisor. With 9.1, it's ISO installation only, no more appliances. So you're essentially booting an ISO and doing an installation much as you would for OpenVMS in the past. We've added some more applications to TCP/IP, and there'll be more to come. The other thing we've done here with TCP/IP services on x86 is that the S applications, the secure applications, SSH, SFTP, SCP, and so forth, are all being replaced with OpenSSH versions. Okay, so at the moment, the OpenSSH kit that you can get for x86 is a beta release. There's still ongoing development work occurring with that, and we'll probably be providing an update within the next week or so to the OpenSSH kit as well. Also included in 9.1, assorted cross-compiler updates, layered products. We'll look at some of those in subsequent slides. We've also put in place licensing for x86. For 9.1, the licenses are preloaded for you, and these are temporary, so that they'll expire after some period of time. There's also a new version of the security server. Why, you may ask, is there a new version of the security server? Well, that's because the security server historically was written in Ada, so we re-implemented that in C. Okay. Obviously, 9.1 also includes updates and fixes flowing through from 9.0 and various documentation updates. The graphic there, the output of the show cluster, that's one of our development clusters. And you could probably guess by looking at the names of those servers that they're not exactly English. So this is actually a cluster in Sweden that Robert Nydal does a great job looking after. And as you can see in this cluster, we've got some 9.1 systems, we've got 2L3, we've even got some 1H1 systems which are actually running on HPVM. So this is one of our main development clusters for testing and developing open source products. So we've been using this quite a lot recently for porting open source products across to x86 and testing them, and we've been frustrating Robert no end by crashing servers and asking him to reboot things and so forth. So if we look at the various, I'll go through first of all the layered products and then open source products, and essentially what these slides are aimed at showing is our current thinking about which products are going to drop in which release. Now, you know, I wouldn't say that this is set in stone. This is based on current thinking and where things are at the moment with the work that's going on. So in terms of 9.1, the layered products that are available in that release are listed there: CMS, the defragger, digital test manager, and a few other bits and pieces. For 9.1a, we're looking to include basic cross-compiler, C++. We're anticipating having a native C++ compiler in Q3 of this year. Various other products there, hopefully T4 as well. There's not too much work to do on T4, to be honest, but there's some work that John Reagan needs to do in order for us to complete the port of T4. 9.2, we really start to see a lot more products coming into play. I've highlighted PerfDat there in green just to remind me that we have actually built that already. There's a possibility that might make it into 9.1a, but that will just depend on how much time we get to do some testing with that. 9.2-1 I've kind of marked there for things like ACMS and Availability Manager, Data Tree, and Deck Forms. So those products will be available in that kind of time frame. And 9.2-X, which is obviously further down the line, the remainder of the products will be available in that kind of time frame. So like I say, we're looking for native compilers to start to become available in 9.1-A timeframe, and likewise with the debugger. That being said, these may not be final versions of things like the debugger. The debugger, as I'm sure you can appreciate, is a very complex and vast piece of software. So, what makes it into Q3 may not be what ends up being in 9.2, put it that way. From an open source perspective, okay, so first up, the color scheme here. So something in green basically means that we've ported it and we've tested it and it works. Anything in red basically means that we've ported it, but there's some kind of blocker. In general, these blockers are currently pthreads related, and we're working through those issues and knocking them off quite successfully. So that's good news. Anything in black is basically something that we haven't really started yet because there's some other dependency, most notably C++, for example, when it comes to something like OpenJDK. So that's so with 9.1 we've included OpenSSH, as I mentioned earlier, and 9.0H we had a few open source products there. There'll be a good few more available in the 9.1a timeframe. Looking forward to 9.2, like I say, OpenJDK depends on C++, and we can't really test the Java products such as Tomcat or Access2 and so forth until we have a working version of Java. That being said, once we have a working version of Java, getting those Java products across the line will be fairly straightforward. We're looking at doing a new version of PHP as part of the 9.2 release. That should be possible. Products such as GNU-plot, for example, have a dependency on X Windows, and we're probably looking at doing X Windows in 2 phases. First up, always gets a little bit confusing when you talk about deck windows in terms of what's the client and what's the server, but we're looking to do this in 2 stages, where the first stage will be the client. You'll be able to do a set display /create, for example, on your OpenVMS system and use some product like Excursion or whatever you have on your laptop. And then the second phase, we will actually include driver support actually in x86 for the graphics and so forth. Okay, and just to fill some space on that slide, there's a Gantt chart up the top there, which is grossly out of date, but we do have plans for this stuff, and I was quite proud of my little Gantt chart until the developers went and ported things more quickly than I'd planned, and now the Gantt chart is completely wrong, so I have to redo it. So now some newish things. Some of them not so new, some of them hot off the press, but hopefully there's something in here which is of interest to everybody one way or another. So just going to step through a number of things here. SQL Relay, which is a relatively new open source product that we've made available. WebUI has been around for probably the first release of WebUI was almost a year ago now. The services portal, I'll talk briefly about that. That's kind of our go-forward environment for interacting with customers and partners online. Various other products there, and then, as I say, we'll start looking at things beyond x86. So SQL Relay, I mean, this really started back in October when Oracle made the announcement that they were discontinuing support of the Oracle Classic database, not RDB, but Oracle Classic, on OpenVMS. Now, you know, a good number of our customers use Oracle Classic on OpenVMS. So any which way you look at it, this was not a good thing. So we spent some time debating how we were going to approach this problem. And what we've done is we've taken this solution, open source product called SQL Relay, which allows you essentially to create an almost ODBC-like gateway between your application and the back-end Oracle database. Okay, so like I put in the little yellow box there, run the Oracle database on another platform. What we've discovered is that many customers using Oracle Classic with OpenVMS already are using Oracle on another platform, Linux, Unix, whatever, and access it from your OpenVMS applications with few, if any, code changes just to recompile and link. That's the theory. So how does the SQL Relay thing work? Well, if you look at it, how things may be today, where you're running your Oracle database maybe on a Linux server, and your client application is running on OpenVMS, you communicate with the database via the Oracle listener process. That's how it works today. What we're looking at with SQL Relay is we replace the Oracle client API with the SQL Relay client API, and it talks to a SQL Relay server process, which then handles the communication with your Oracle database. Okay. So this is quite a neat piece of software, and it doesn't only support Oracle. It supports a number of other databases, which the last bullet point on that slide, including DB2, MySQL, Oracle Postgres, and Sybase, and Microsoft SQL Server. The little graphic to the right there, I thank a member of the community, Arnie, for that. Arnie's done some fantastic work playing around with SQL Relay and testing all of the combinations that are actually shown on that slide. He's developed clients on OpenVMS, talking to all the databases illustrated on that slide, all of the configurations. So with Windows and with Linux, talking to SQL Server on Windows, talking to Oracle, talking to Postgres, whatever. It all works, right? So this solution is not constrained purely to Oracle, although I would note that that is very much our primary focus. Because like I said, you know, this is aimed at helping those customers who are impacted by the Oracle decision. So what else have we got on this slide? So I said essentially we're looking at replacing the Oracle client API with the SQL Relay API, and statements are passed through to the database that way. What else do you get with SQL Relay? You get command line tool, which is a little bit like Oracle SQL Plus, somewhat limited functionality, and some fairly simple import-export tools, but there are some limitations. For example, if your application code uses raw OCI calls, this is the native Oracle API. If you're not familiar with these things, SQL Relay won't work. You'll need to make some code changes. And also SQL Relay doesn't provide any kind of SQL loader type functionality. So if you're kind of doing bulk loads of data into your Oracle database using SQL loader, SQL Relay doesn't provide you with anything there. But from an application perspective, it's really kind of quite good. It gives you a lot of flexibility and a lot of options. So we've ported the client to OpenVMS, Alpha and Titanium. We've tested it with both Oracle and MariaDB. We've implemented a language agnostic API, so it's easier for you to use the SQL Relay client from, say, your COBOL or Fortran code or whatever, in addition to C or C++. And we're actually making very, very good progress on an embedded SQL preprocessor, focused, as I say, primarily on Oracle, but we can look to extend that to other databases in the future, and also focusing primarily, initially at least, on C and COBOL. And we've received some great help from customers with this, providing application code so we can test the tools that we're developing and make sure they're producing the right results. We're also adding in JDBC support. So from Java, you'll be able to work with SQL Relay and talk to whatever database you like, Oracle or whatever. We've also created a nice little Docker file. So you can create a Docker container running SQL Relay server and, for example, Oracle Instant Client. Or whatever other database client you might want to use. So this is proving to be quite a good solution. I got a nice email from a customer literally about an hour ago who's undertaking a proof of concept, you know, saying that they were getting some good results. So this is very promising. Next product I want to talk about is a thing called WebUI. Now, some of you may have seen or heard me talk about WebUI in the past. The product has been, I think we did the first release maybe September timeframe last year. But what WebUI is all about is really providing a browser-based, well, no, that's not strictly true, an HTTP-based interface to a number of OpenVMS system management type functions and information sources. So I've set up the top of the slide there that this is a RESTful OpenVMS management interface. So essentially it is a REST API, right? You interact with this thing by sending HTTP requests with JSON request bodies, and you get back a JSON response containing the results. The browser-based user interface is just one consumer of that REST API. So there's absolutely nothing to stop you writing your own little scripts, Python scripts or whatever on Windows or Linux to interact with this REST API running on the OpenVMS system. So the sorts of functions that we've got in there at the moment are listed there: user management, process management, monitoring various data, CPU and memory, system parameter management, TCP/IP configuration management. There's quite a lot of functionality in there, and there's a little bit more to come. Another feature that we've got in WebUI is an optional module to interact with PerfDat. PerfDat, of course, allows you to get metrics on your VM. This component within WebUI allows you to hook straight into PerfDat and create graphs and look at what's going on in your systems in near real time if you so desire. Just looking at a couple of other screens within WebUI here. System overview page, which kind of looks a little bit like Monitor System, I suppose, and the cluster overview page. It's a little bit hard to read perhaps, but it gives you details of the nodes within your cluster, and if WebUI is running on those cluster nodes, you can click on links and go straight to that node and look at what's going on there. The next release, which is probably not too far away really, is going to include some additional data in the I/O space, some XFC data, and also a fairly simple but usable WebSockets-based terminal interface. So via your browser, you will actually be able to physically log into the VMS, the underlying VMS system, and type commands and so forth. I mentioned before that you can, you're not constrained here to the browser interface. You can write your own little tools that run on another platform, Windows or Linux or whatever. So for example, there are Python bindings available for the REST API. You can connect to WebUI and issue commands in little Python scripts, for example, to create a new user or delete a user. The example here creates a user. But essentially, any function that WebUI supports, you can access it via a script in some way or another like this. The services portal, now this is not really a VMS thing per se. It's a service platform which is really intended primarily for use by our level 2 support team in their function to support customers and partners. So the idea with the portal really is to make life easier and more efficient from your perspective in terms of your interactions with us. So, providing a one-stop shop for things like downloading kits and so forth. Okay, so we've launched the first version of this portal. We did that to coincide with the release of OpenVMS 9.1, And this is primarily to provide a vehicle for allowing you to download the 9.1 kits, so the 9.1 ISO and layered product and open source kits. And we will look to add more functionality to the portal over time, functions that we hope will be useful to customers and partners. And obviously, we'd value your feedback on what you would like to see in there, and we'll take that into consideration. What we've got in there at the moment, looking at the high-level services just to the right there, currently you can do a number of things. I mentioned that you can download packages, so that's package management as it's listed there. There's a basic problem reporting interface, so you can enter details of problems that you've got with your VMS system or whatever. The portal knows who you are. You have to log in. So the fact that you actually have a login kind of bypasses the need for us to check whether you are a valid support customer or whatever. That's kind of implicit by the fact that you can use the portal. The problem reporting interface allows you to, as I say, log cases. You can attach log files and other artifacts to those cases when you report the problem. You can't at the moment upload crash dumps, but we are working on providing some facility for that. There are some challenges there. The size of the crash dumps perhaps being one of them. Another kind of neat feature that we've built into the portal at the moment is T4 data analysis. So you can upload into the portal your T4 data files, and you can analyze them. You can produce graphs and look at those graphs and print them and play around with the data and so forth. There's actually quite a lot you can do, and it's probably a separate talk in itself going through all of the details there. But if you look on the core functions on the left-hand side, one of the things I've listed there is impersonation. So, for example, any of the level 2 support team can impersonate you, the customer. So if you need our help, for example, analyzing a T4 file, you could maybe get to a certain point in your analysis and say, hey, look, I need some help here. And members of the support team could jump in and see exactly what you're doing and assist you with that analysis. Okay. Oh, and probably before I forget, yes, one of the other core components of the services portal is a VMS command line tool, a thing called VSP. And if your VMS systems have some means of directly accessing the internet, either directly or via a proxy server or whatever, as long as they have HTTPS access to the portal, you can use the VSP command line tool to download kits from the portal. You can use it to upload T4 files and things like that. And again, we will be adding to that functionality over time. Number of other things that we've been working on here. It's just checking the time. ACMS integration. This is a project, like a lot of these projects are driven by customers asking us for help. So this was a customer really who was stuck with a very old Visual Basic application using a very old version of the ACMS desktop connector, needing to move to a .NET environment. So what we've done here is we've resurrected the old TPware software, and we've enhanced it. We've added SSL TLS support, and we've included some code generation facilities, made it multi-platform. It will now work on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS, and we've also provided alternative language bindings. So you can now develop clients to interact with your ACMS applications if you're an ACMS user in languages other than C or C++. You can use .NET languages, VB.NET, C#.NET, Python, Java, whatever. So that's worked very well. So this is an example of where we've taken an existing product that we've inherited from HP and we've enhanced it. Another one, which I won't go through in huge detail, where we've done similar things, is WSIT, the Web Services Integration Toolkit. The main hindrance with WSIT was that the way in which it worked, it kind of constrained everything to the Open VMS platform. So WSIT is essentially a Java integration framework, and it allows you to integrate between your Java code and your legacy 3GL applications or ACMS. But that Java code has to run on the VMS platform because it communicates with the other bits and pieces via ICC. Well, that's okay, but not ideal. So what we've done is we've modified WSIT to support alternative protocols, specifically the AMQP protocol, Advanced Message Queuing Protocol with RabbitMQ. And we've also added support for additional languages once again. So you can develop clients in the languages I've listed there, talking to your backend system using WSIT in conjunction with the RabbitMQ middleware. I won't worry about that slide. The IDE extension, this has been around now for probably a couple of years, maybe a little bit longer, but this is a graphical IDE that we've put in place to allow users to do remote development. So it's based on Microsoft Visual Studio Code, which you install on your laptop or your MacBook or whatever, or your Linux desktop. Doesn't really matter. Microsoft Visual Studio Code freely available for download. And our IDE extension is similarly freely available for download via the link that I put there on the slide. And essentially the way this extension works is via SSH. So you don't need to install any components on your OpenVMS system. You just need to make sure that you've got SSH available and can support a reasonably high level of encryption. And everything will work. It will work with HP and VSI versions of OpenVMS. Currently supports quite a range of languages there, and yeah, it works pretty well. It's a nice tool. So I think we've just got a screenshot here, which what are we doing here? This actually looks like a debug session, I think. Yes, actually it's Python. So this is using the Python debugger within the IDE extension to develop some Python code, with Python application. So you can find out more information about the IDE. I mean, maybe you've got some younger developers who don't like using TPU or EDT or something like that, and they'd much rather use Microsoft Visual Studio Code. This could be an option for you. Also provides other benefits, seamless integration with Git for source code control and things like that. So we've created some videos at the link we've got there. There's some documentation on the portal. And there's also a forum within our forum environment for discussing issues pertaining to the IDE. We're not actively doing too much with it. It's at the moment, it's kind of in the, we've got some ideas for additional features, but at the moment it's sort of maintenance. If customers or we identify issues, we use it quite a lot internally, we'll fix them up and so forth, and we'll post something on the forum and elsewhere. A few other things very quickly. CRTL updates. This is an ongoing program of work, really overdue for a long time. The team is being headed up by Gaten D'Antoni, which I'm sure many of you know, and Gaten and the team are doing a fantastic job of working through what is a fairly long list of updates for the CRTL. A lot of enhancements going in there. We're doing, I think, a very good job of keeping pace with OpenSSL releases as new versions are released by the OpenSSL organization. Generally within 2 or 3 days, we can have those available for you on OpenVMS now. We've got that process very smooth. ACME LDAP, I've said there will be released soon. Well, it already has been released. And it's based on Open LDAP now. So if you want to use this new version of ACME LDAP, you need to use it in conjunction with our Open LDAP kit. And associated with that is some significantly revised documentation. And a big thank you to Paul Nunes on the support team for pulling that documentation together. Paul did a great job. The other product I've got here, a thing called Ansible. This is kind of more looking ahead. It's something that came up in discussions with a number of customers over the past year or so, but it's something that we were thinking about doing anyway around cloud provisioning. So once we have OpenVMS x86 up and running, of course, deploying in cloud is a viable option, and it's something we want to do. I'm sure it's something that many of you customers want to do. Ansible is really very useful for assisting with that cloud provisioning and deployment of applications across multiple nodes and so forth. So we've ported Ansible. We've still got a little bit of work to do there, but it's looking pretty good. Other things, I mentioned OpenSSH already, so I won't really spend too much time on that. Just to note that it is installed as a separate layered product. So basically you have to install TCP/IP services first, the core product, and then you need to install OpenSSH on top of that in order to get the S services, SSH, SFTP, and so forth. We've recently released a new version of the Apache web server based on Apache HTTPD 2.4.48. Not really too much new in that, I suppose. We've changed authentication for the OpenVMS authentication module to use sys $ACMW. We've made some other changes, included some additional modules, including Redis-based shared object cache, which you can use in conjunction with Redis, which is an open source cache. Okay, so yeah, I mean, the key point there is in addition to 9.1, we kind of have been working on a number of other things. I won't talk to you too much about Git. We'll run out of time. PerfDat, as I mentioned before, PerfDat is all around performance monitoring, alpha and integrity, and we've actually completed the build for x86, like I said, but still some testing to be done. A very powerful alerting capability that a number of customers have been plugging into to make even better use of PerfDat. In addition to just, capacity planning and performance troubleshooting, customers are using it to actually detect problems on their systems and report those problems in a timely fashion. Maybe some resources maxing out or whatever. Nice product. Service control, we acquired that at the same time as we acquired PerfDat from HPE, but we haven't done too much with it to date, to be honest. But we are planning to. Terry is working on that and expect to see some more details about service control in the not too distant future. It's a nice little product, and I think it will actually come into its own with x86 further down the line. Essentially, it allows you to take non-cluster aware applications and make them more highly available. It can monitor various things on your system, and when something breaks, it can take the appropriate action to make sure that the service is transitioned to another node within your cluster. Ada compiler. Now, we'd appreciate your feedback on this. Really, we've had a number of inquiries around Ada, but it's a significant investment for us to actually do another compiler. So we need to know if you want Ada on OpenVMS. Please get in touch with Terry and let him know, and we'll factor your requirements into the equation, right? One customer, for example, is not enough for us to consider developing an Ada compiler unless they're a really big customer. So if you do have a requirement for Ada, please do let us know. We are seriously considering this, but we need your input.
Brett, I'm going to add a real quick comment since you're bringing this up. Sorry for interrupting. But
that's fine.
Yes. As Brett said, we really need to build a business case here because there is a significant investment involved here. So we need information from multiple customers to tell us what their needs are and in order to really build a business case. So that's all I wanted to say. So your help, any customer's help is welcome.
Yep. Thanks, Terry. Excellent. So just a kind of not entirely related to that, but another announcement that came out recently, or reasonably recently at least, is that Qlik, who acquired the Attunity products back in 2019, recently announced that they're ending support for the Qlik Connect product on OpenVMS. And a number of customers asked if we could help. So we've talked with Qlik, and they are happy for us to provide level 1 and level 2 support. Note that doesn't mean level 3 support. We cannot provide engineering support. But if you are an Attunity user and you want level 1 or level 2 support, again, please get in touch with Terry, and we would be very happy to help you with that. Also happy to talk to you about alternative solutions or whatever, obviously. Looking beyond x86, I'll have to start talking extra quickly because otherwise we'll run out of time for questions. But like I say, while obviously our main focus is getting 9.2 out the door and production quality release and so forth, we're thinking ahead. And this lovely graphic here is from my friend Chris Brown. Chris has a really good artistic bent at times. But Chris also comes up with lots of interesting ideas. And one of the ideas that Chris came up with a little while ago was, well, look, once we're on x86, can we run VMS on some small device, something like the size of a Raspberry Pi? And so, we pondered this idea, and I mean, everybody's very, very busy. So, we can't sort of say to the engineers, hey, drop everything and see if you can get OpenVMS running on some such device. But this is interesting. So one of the engineers in their precious spare time actually invested a lot of time and energy into investigating this. And what we've succeeded in doing is actually running up OpenVMS on this little UP2 squared or UP squared device, which has an Atom processor in it, and the other resources there, 8 or 4 gig of RAM and so forth. I mean, you get a lot of bangs per buck here with these small devices. So we've successfully managed to boot OpenVMS on this device, and it works. It does sensible stuff. Is it a complete working environment? No, it's not. I mean, there are device drivers missing and things like that. But this is kind of interesting, okay? And we're keen to try and do more with this as time permits. And we're also very keen to engage the community. We're interested in people's ideas. We're interested in people's contributions. If you have nothing better to do on a Sunday afternoon and feel like writing a device driver, we would love for you to do that. So keep an eye out. There'll be some more information forthcoming. I've made the somewhat smart comment down there: break out the soldering iron and have some fun. I mean, this is true. At the moment, you do need to basically solder up a particular cable in order to get this device working. But that's kind of part of the fun. So, this isn't a formal project or anything like that. We just want to see what level of interest there is. We want to see where it goes. And I would also note that it's actually been incredibly helpful to us. The engineer who spent some time playing around with this in weekends and in the evenings, it actually helped them to identify some problems that we've needed to fix in 9.1 and obviously going forward 9.2. So it's been a very, very worthwhile exercise any which way you look at it. Migration, I really won't spend much time on this because I'm conscious of time, but essentially we're able to provide a range of professional services and so forth. That's a separate topic for conversation. But what I want to mention here is around migration services, and in particular, OpenVMS x86 migration. Now, you talk to some people and they will say that porting applications to x86 will be easy. You just recompile and link. Yeah, okay. So if you've got maybe 50,000 lines of C code and not much else, that will probably be the case. But if you've got a complicated application environment with third-party products and so forth, several million lines of code written in different languages, I don't know, ACMS, you've got DEC forms or FMS or whatever thrown into the mix, these ports generally have some complexity to them, right? It's not a simple recompile and link. There's more work required. And, we obviously want x86 to be successful. And if you're looking at moving to x86, and we most certainly hope you are, then please start talking to us about how we can help you, to plan your migration, how we can help you to identify any issues that maybe might be lurking there that you haven't considered, or if you actually need people with skills to help you to do the migration, we're more than willing to assist. Okay, so I won't bore you with the methodology slide, but like I say here, application migration, if you're thinking about migrating to x86, start planning now and contact us if you need help. And the sorts of things you need to be thinking about. Have you got all the code? Can you rebuild everything? When was the last time you rebuilt everything? Do you have any potentially unsupported third-party products to deal with? How are you going to actually test the port that it gives the right results and so forth? The sooner you start thinking about these things, if you're looking at moving to x86, the better, right? We're getting very, very close to 9.2. We're getting very close to production release. If you're looking to get to x86, as I say, now's the time to start with this planning. Okay. So that's about it, really. As I say, there's been an awful lot going on over the past few months, but there's still a lot to do. Probably the next big release will be the 9.1a, which is on the way, and I talked about what to expect in that release, and then it's onwards and upwards towards 9.2. But like I say, we've been investigating other things besides. We've been looking at things like the Atom project, various open source initiatives, lots of discussion around cloud deployment and so forth. Plenty going on. Okay, look, we'll leave it there, and I'm sorry, Terry, probably took a little bit too long, but questions?
Brett, you're fine. You did a great job. Thank you very much. Very, very informative. I'm sure the folks, participants, find it the same way. So let's go ahead and jump into some questions and answers. We'll give Brett a chance to get a sip of a coffee or water or juice or something to keep him going in the middle of the night where he's at. I did want to mention also that Eddie Orcutt has been able to join this webinar as well as a panelist. We weren't sure if he was going to be able to join, but so Eddie will also be available to address some of your questions as well. So we've had a series of questions come in. Let's start with some basic ones. I've tried to combine a few things here. And of course, it has to do with, I think, some of the timing. First of all, the availability, as well as the timing of the availability of some of the native compilers, such as Pascal, COBOL, and Fortran. Brett or Eddie, one of you want to address that?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, that the intent at the moment is to have the C++ compiler available Q3. The sooner the better, obviously. Now, the reason the C++ compiler is important is that it is required in order for us to do the other native compilers. Right? So I won't bore you with the details of that, and I get them wrong anyway. I think John Reagan talked about that last time, but just take it as read that we need the native C++ compiler first before we can do native compilers for the other languages. In terms of those other languages, we have discussed what the priority order will be. I mean, obviously, we internally need things like C and Bliss and Macro, but we're certainly aware of the fact that customers require Pascal, COBOL, Fortran, BASIC. And we will try and prioritize those compilers as we see appropriate. I mean, based on customer demand, essentially, or whatever. But like I say, once we have that C++ compiler, there will be a rolling program of work to systematically work through making those other compilers available. I can't really give you any more accurate time frame than that at the moment, but we'll certainly keep you updated because it's very, very important.
Thanks, Brett. Kind of along those same lines and time frame, Charles is asking about the time frame for the debugger. Any additional insight that we can share at this moment in time?
Yeah, look, I mentioned that, I think, very quickly on one of the slides that we're hoping to have a version of the debugger available in Q3. There may be some questions around the level of completeness, so let's qualify that a little bit and say a beta version of the debugger in Q3. Okay, but the work on the debugger is actually going pretty well. It's just it's a fairly large and complex beast. So, you know, it's a significant project in of itself. But there is very good progress being made, and I think that the statement I made there about having a beta available in Q3 is reasonable.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Tim has a question about the Hyper-V hypervisor, if we have any update or potential dates on that.
We don't have potential dates on that, but there is commitment that it's definitely the next hypervisor in the line, and it's top of mind is something that we do need to do. So no dates at the moment, unfortunately. That being said, you know, and this is possibly, you know, this is where Claire will probably fly over here and hit me with a big stick, although we'd have to spend 2 weeks in quarantine first. But our general belief is that it will not be a significant amount of work. I mean, it's fair to say that every hypervisor is a little bit different, and there are some tweaks and some things that we need to deal with. But we don't imagine it being, you know, a supermassive project by any means.
Great. Thanks, Brett. Let's see here. Okay, maybe a wish list from Jim. Can deck windows be accelerated? Never hurts to ask.
Yeah, it never hurts to ask. Don't know. I mean, that will, we can discuss that, but you know, the plan is the plan that I discussed at the moment. I mean, you know, Eddie and I have discussed this actually just last week. We're very conscious of the fact that some customers are very keen to have that capability. It becomes a balancing act for us, I guess. Yeah.
Here's the question from Jim that Eddie has started to address a bit, but let's open it up. Is VSI looking at an office-friendly bare metal server? Question. OpenVMS native x86 is needed in an office environment offering.
So that's one for Eddie. I'll throw that one to Eddie.
Yeah.
Well, today we're qualifying the DL380. We've also have a major customer has DL20s that are similar and if you will, designed what the DL380 is. So we're looking at supporting that as well. But those are the two HPE rack mount servers that we're looking at today. We would like to look at more servers in the future. No time frames for them or even models at the moment, but we are looking at others. And same with other non-HPE environments as well, such as Dell, because Dell and HPE are the two major you know, server manufacturers on the market. So we would like to support both of their products, but we're looking at whatever models that we, you know, within Dell that we can support. But again, no time frames. We're working with Dell on that, but no time frames or models at this time.
Thanks, Eddie. Question from Stephen. You have deck windows listed. Have you looked at supporting Wayland and using it as the back end?
We have not. I mean, there's a lot of detail here to work through. I mean, fundamentally, the major time consumer, I suppose, as far as deck windows or full deck windows implementation is concerned, is the device driver side of things, right? So for having a graphics console attached to an x86 system running OpenVMS, and that piece of work doesn't go away irrespective of the software that you're using on top of it.
Okay, let's continue with deck windows. Will there be better diagnostic codes to debug security attachment issues as opposed to the standard cannot connect message?
There's no escaping the fact. Sorry, Terry?
No, I was going to say it's a bit more of a deep dive. So
it is, yeah. It's you know, we can't ignore the fact that we've got to do the driver work irrespective of what the software that sits on top of it is, and that's the kind of tricky bit, if you like. Have we talked about these sorts of products in the past? Yes, we certainly have, but you know, I think we need to get what we've got at the moment working first, as opposed to jumping straight into something else.
Question from Robert. Oh, sorry. Question from Robert. What is the time frame for OpenVMS x86 on Atom offerings?
Well, look, as I say, I mean, this is started its life as what Chris and I would refer to as a skunkworks project, you know, where Chris had the idea and a couple of engineers embraced it in their spare time and got it working. It's not a formal project. Possibly one day it will become a formal project, but what we want to do at the moment is, you know, if there are people in the community who are interested, we would love to hear from them. And we'll look at trying to set up some sort of community initiative where people in the community can work on this and break out the soldering iron and make those cables and experiment and essentially use that as a vehicle for moving it forward. You know, as I say, I mean, our focus at the moment is very much around 9.2. We've got to get that out the door. You know, customers, many customers are depending on us getting 9.2 out the door in the time frame that we're working towards. We can't kind of pull resources to work on Atom just at the moment. So for the foreseeable future, it's going to be very much a community-based project. But as I say, if you're interested, we'd definitely love to hear from you.
Well, just to end that conversation about Atom, John simply writes, Atom project, please take my money.
There you go, Terry. There you go.
Keep it on the list, man. Keep it on the list. Let's see. Robert has a question about is the separate SSH product available for Itanium?
It will be, yeah. Look, we're planning a. I'm not quite sure how we're doing it, but we will do a field test of the new TCP/IP product, and that will include OpenSSH. That's probably not in the too distant future. I mean, maybe September timeframe, something like that, right? We're very close to that. I mean, in terms of what we're doing with OpenSSH, I mean, the team are doing builds on Itanium and x86 and Alpha for that matter on a daily basis. So there's no particular issue with making it available on Itanium, but that will be combined with the broader TCP/IP product.
Okay, guys. Here's a toughie. Here's a good one. This is from David. Original version 9.2 is going to be the full production ready release. It seems that 9.2 is now going to be a continuation of 9.1. That is, not everything is available. What will be the new full production ready release number?
It's a very good question.
It is. It's a very good question. I'm not sure if it's going to be version 9.2-X, whatever X is. But Brett, Eddie, if you want to comment or postpone a comment, that's okay.
Well, I think, I mean, it's a good question, and I think it's also good that clearly people were paying attention to the slides. Just having a look back through my notes here. Yeah. The main things I think that slip into, say, 9.2-1, like ACMS and data retrieve and so forth. I mean, there are some dependencies there that we have. So, you know, just for example, with regards to ACMS and to a lesser degree data retrieve, ACMS depends on CDD, which of course depends on RDB. So that's kind of one of the main reasons why that's pushed out. There's a dependency on Oracle there. I would like to think, and I would be very, very disappointed and saddened if 9.2-1 does not include the vast majority of things that the vast majority of customers need, put it that way. But there will be some stragglers, you know, that will come a little later in terms of the product. Sorry, Eddie.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm looking at a non-release version of the roadmap right now, and you're right with 9.2-1 that it will fill in a lot of holes that you know, 9.2 won't have.
Okay. Well, David or no, I think that's probably the most appropriate and best answer we can provide right now. Thank you for the question. Keith asks, what version of OpenJDK is targeted for OpenVMS version 9.2?
Yeah, another good question. So, look, first up, we will just do a port of the existing OpenJDK version, which is what, OpenJDK 8. Now, the reason for that is to basically, that will be the most expedient way that we can get a version of Java onto x86. It will allow us to tease out the issues associated with the just-in-time compiler aspects of x86 and so forth. We expect a few you know, minor challenges in getting that across the line. But what I want to say there is with the new LLVM-based compiler backends and so forth, we will be making a very, very big jump in terms of language standard support around C++. So at the moment, as I'm sure you're aware, you know, the C++ compiler on OpenVMS doesn't even support C++11. With the new LLVM-based compiler backend, we'll jump to whatever the latest standard version is. I don't know, is it C++19 or something like that? Now, at the moment, in terms of OpenJDK, we are constrained by how far we can go with the existing C++ compiler. Once we've got the LLVM compiler backends, we will be moving to a much later version of OpenJDK, but first cab off the rank will be the existing version. Okay.
Thank you. From Steve, where are you currently at with emulator support?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. Emulators and
yeah, if they mean alpha VAX emulators, if they do, we have a number of them available. Third-party partners we have, EMU, VM, Migration Specialties, AVT, or VAIR, Stromisys, open source SIM8. So we have those available if that's what they're referring to.
Yeah, I think also, just as a reminder, from our standpoint, VSI, we provide support for any OpenVMS version, no matter how it's being used and which emulator it's being used on. Obviously, we're trying to progress our x86 product so that this gives customers probably an excellent choice to keep moving forward. So, Steve, if you want to go into more details, we're happy to have a conversation at your convenience. Let's see, when will the lib $wait issue be fixed? It is used throughout our code. This is from Phil.
Is this the, let me think, Eddie, is this the floating point thing with lib $wait?
Could be. I'm not sure. It's been a long time since I've looked at issues that were there. So
I mean, I'm not sure if there's anything there that requires fixing, although I do recall that there's an issue associated with the floating point type. So look, no, I can't answer that one, Terry. I think we should check with John on that.
Okay.
I'm not aware of any changes in behavior that we're planning for x86, but I may be wrong, so we should check with John.
Okay. Phil, we'll look to get back to you after doing that. Let's see, from Tom, will OpenVMS x86 in a VM only run on a supported hardware platform, i.e. DL380 generation 910, or will a DL385 AMD or any other DL380 Gen 8 also be a valid platform?
So in terms of the if you're running VMS within a hypervisor, we really haven't put in place any particular stipulations around what the underlying physical hardware needs to be. There may be some limitations imposed by the hypervisor, but essentially if your hardware is, if your CPU is able to run OpenVMS, we haven't really imposed any restrictions, as I say, around what the physical hardware needs to be if you're planning to run VMS in a virtualized manner. I mean, the extrapolation of this, of course, is that some customers are very, very interested in terms of running OpenVMS in a cloud environment. And, we're doing some work in this space. We would have no idea what the underlying physical hardware is if you're trying to run VMS in AWS or anything like that, right? We just know what the hypervisor is.
Thanks, Brett. When will DataTree be available? One of the slides suggested 9.2-1.
Yeah, I don't, it may be, well, it's certainly possible to build DataTree earlier than that, but as to whether it would be useful, I'm not entirely sure. So at the moment, I would still leave it on that 9.2-1. But I'm open to discussion on that one, I think, Terry.
Okay. From Gerard, about Ada, did you speak with Ada Core and with other investors? The answer to Ada Core is yes. We have had a conversation with those. I'm not sure about the other investors. We've certainly talked to a few customers, a few users, but I don't know. Brett, Eddie, do you know if we've talked to other investors?
Not that I'm aware of, not in the strict sense of an investor, but like you said, we have talked that here to Core and some others.
Yeah.
For sure. Yep.
Okay. Question just in general, yes, the slides will be available for download. In fact, the whole webinar is being recorded and will be on our website in the next couple of days. From Ron, what will be the quote smallest, cheapest x86 box on which OpenVMS will run? Asking because I have an interest on my desk at home.
Well, I tell you what, that little Atom device that I showed on the slide there, I think depending on the configuration, you can get one of those for $300 or $400 US.
And don't some of our engineers actually, run it on their Macs?
Yeah. Yeah, there's absolutely no issue running the hypervisor on your laptop or your Mac. I mean, obviously, once we've got Hyper-V support in there, a Windows laptop is absolutely fair game.
Okay. Don asked, any plans to provide VAX or alpha binary compatibility on later versions of x86? I know it was discussed on older roadmaps.
Yeah,
Eddie, sorry. Yep.
Yeah, I was just going to say that we had done work on it, at least on the alpha translator going to x86, but we stopped that a couple of years ago. Depending upon customer demand again, we may restart that, but we do think it's a good thing to have. We just don't have it at the moment anyway.
Andreas writes, what sense does it make testing our software with the Pascal cross compiler when the native version will finally generate much different code?
I mean, it's a fair comment. I mean, obviously the testing will validate that functionally the code is working. But obviously you would expect better performance with the native compilers for sure. I mean, I would suggest that, the cross compilers are very useful for actually ensuring that you can use them today. You can use them some months back to actually verify that you can at least build your code and that some things work, even if performance may not be totally optimal. But yeah, for sure, obviously the native compilers are the end game here.
Okay, Gerard has another question. We know of a customer who cannot go today to VS5 versions and have to wait and jump to x86. How can they be helped, including security issues? I think, Brett, some of that ties into your comments about some of the professional services and some of the porting help that we're
exactly.
Offering.
It's a very broad question. So no, I mean the customer needs to engage with us, and we can try and figure out how we can best help them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can get Adam and Jan maybe to have a conversation with Gerard.
Yep.
Peter, thank you for your comment. He's saying great update. Brett, you should know that.
Thank you.
Let's see, question about Postgres. Postgres SQL SQL Server question mark.
Right. So let me see what we can make out of that. So in terms of Postgres, so what we have available today is a Postgres client API. So you can interact with Postgres, say running on Linux from your OpenVMS systems, and there are customers using this, and it works very, very well. We do also have a project underway. I mean, there's only so much I could cover in 45 minutes, but we do also have a project underway to actually port the Postgres database to OpenVMS. Okay, now that work is going pretty well. I won't comment on when it will be finished, but the team are actively doing testing and trying to beat out the remaining issues. But probably the key point to note here is that project, in terms of porting the Postgres database to VMS, is predicated on another piece of work. And that other piece of work is SSIO, Shared Stream IO. So you cannot get Postgres working well on OpenVMS without shared stream IO. So this is another piece of work, and I think it's on our roadmap, Terry, that we've been working on SSIO, and indeed we have. So again, I don't want to, put a stake in the ground as to when the team will be ready. That's a horrendously complex piece of work that cuts through several layers of the operating system down into the bowels of things. But that work is actually progressing very, very well, and we're now essentially looking at what I would consider corner cases. The trouble is, of course, that those corner cases are also the most difficult ones to debug and resolve. But the ultimate upshot of all this work is that within the not too distant future, we should actually have available working versions of these two things, SSIO and Postgres on OpenVMS. In terms of other database options, like I indicated with the SQL Relay product, and also some other work that we've got going on, we will have a range of database connectivity solutions available for you within the OpenVMS environment, whether the database is on your OpenVMS system or running somewhere else. We're really looking at trying to expand integration in general, be it data level integration, be it middleware, whatever.
Thanks, Brett. Question from Paul: are there any plans for an Itanium emulator for running VMS on VMware or VirtualBox, etc.? I know that in previous WebExes you mentioned this was unlikely.
We'll stick with the unlikely comment. Yeah.
I agree.
Here's a question about the next boot camp. I don't think we have a comment on that right now. There's still various issues going on in the world, which we've all had to live with for the last year and a half. So will there be one? Possibly. Will it be a different format? Probably. But we're not ready to announce anything yet. I think it's premature.
Yeah, I think it would certainly be fantastic to see some familiar faces and hopefully some new ones as well, Terry. But yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. From Maurizio, any news about the OpenVMS file system, VAFS or GFS?
No, there's no update on that, Maurizio. I mean, we kind of paused that work to focus on other things that we deem more important towards getting 9.2 across the line. So, we'll come back and revisit that, but the focus has very much been on 9.1 and things. I mean, sorry, on 9.2. Yeah.
Question from Larry: is there any performance analysis info between x86 VMS and Itanium VMS? Great question.
The simple answer on that is no, for the simple reason that I kind of alluded to before answering the question from Andreas. But such measurements at the moment would probably not be particularly meaningful. Keep in mind that at the moment all we do have are the cross compilers, so essentially everything in the operating system and any applications you build to run on it are built with cross compilers. And your mileage is going to vary in terms of the quality and performance of that code. So we could do some performance measurements today and do them 9.2 production release with native compilers, and the numbers would be vastly different. So as I say, kind of a long way of saying the simple answer is no. But that being said, we are gearing up for starting to do that, and we're putting plans in place for a sensible program of work to actually come up with some comparative metrics to compare Itanium to x86. Our general feeling is that things will look pretty good. I've had some discussions with John Reagan about this, and again, I won't go into any detail because it's far too late for me to think about such complex things. But our general view is that x86 is going to perform very, very well.
I think the other comment is we've already, just to add to what you're saying, Brett, is that we got folks. We have a team that when the time is right, they know who they are. They're going to be doing this performance analysis. So
yep.
It's there. It's in place. It's just a matter of timing. From Charles, any plans to have OpenVMS run in VMs on Azure or AWS? I think I could answer this, but I'll let Brad or Eddie tackle it.
Yes, Charles, the answer to that is yes. I can't give you a time frame on that, but this is something we're very, very keen to do for sure. Yeah.
Let's see, we've got a couple. Well, we've got more than a couple more. This is from Harry. We have OpenVMS 8.4 with crucial pension system on it. What is the risk of upgrade? Will 9.1 compatible be our Apache Perl .com question mark?
So running software on 8.4. I mean, essentially going from 8.4 to 9.x is going to be a little different from, say, going, it's not a totally accurate statement, but it's not going to be significantly different to going from, say, a VSI version, say 8.4-2L3 or something like that to 9.1. There are some differences because obviously we've made some updates, since 8.4, but essentially there's not significantly greater risk, I think, in moving from that 8.4 environment directly versus moving from a VSI environment directly. I mean, that being said, you probably really do want to look at the supportability of that 8.4 environment and whether you actually want to consider upgrading to a VSI version where we can provide you with better support anyway, and potentially at the same time get you into better shape for a move to x86.
So in fairness to the questioner, the next note says basically operating system 8.4-2L1. So Brett, he's already taken your advice.
Ah, there you go. Yep. So I would not foresee. I mean, obviously you don't just go and do these upgrades and whack it into production. That you go through a proper testing process and all that sort of thing. But in general terms, upgrading from the VSI version, from HP version to VSI version is a very low risk exercise. I mean, again, contact us and people like Dave Sullivan and professional services team, fantastic at helping customers with these upgrades.
From Jeffrey, would you envision nodes or even .NET Core on OpenVMS in the future? What technical challenge would be implementing those open source products?
I don't know that we'd necessarily, there will be some technical challenges. I mean, don't get me wrong, but if you kind of take a step back and you look at the work we're doing in terms of enhancing the C runtime library and in terms of moving the compiler back into LLVM, a lot of those sorts of things are fair game. I haven't really looked too much at, say, the .NET Core, but if you say look at something like Node.js, Node.js is underpinned by the V8 JavaScript engine, and the V8 JavaScript engine requires LLVM. So, once we've got the LLVM-based compilers on OpenVMS, there are some interesting things we can do. Something like Node.js would definitely be a possibility, as indeed would, say, other programming languages such as Rust and Go. I mean, I'm not saying that we're going to do these things, but as I say, once we've got LLVM in place with the native compilers on x86, these things are very, very definitely possible.
Back to x86 from Mark, even though parts may be missing in the initial version of 9.2, or is the initial version of 9.2 still production ready in the sense that it will have production level support?
Right. I think the answer to that has to be yes, Terry. Yeah.
Yes.
Most definitely. The big thing about 9.2, it's production ready. I mean, this is, we're comfortable that this is production quality code, that's running the operating system.
From Renee, do you have an update on the compatibility with VMware standard platform?
I can't comment on that. Eddie, do you know?
No.
I mean, in general terms, we've had very little issue with all the different VMware flavors. It's worked very, very nicely. You know, the biggest issues we had with VMware were right at the start, and we actually got some really fantastic help from VMware to get things sorted out there. And you know, people like Claire Grant and others are running in VMware daily in a range of different VMware environments. So I would be surprised if there were issues. We'd certainly be interested to hear.
I don't think there are issues, and I think we're running up to 64 cores in the VMware environment today. I think is what we're doing or have
Correct.
done.
Okay, has RDB now been confirmed for VMS x86? The only ones who can properly answer that is Oracle. But as we've stated, I think several times, we have a very close working relationship with Oracle, the RDB team, and both from mainly from a technical standpoint. So we truly believe that they're going to be there. They've stated their position on this in various public forums in the past. We don't see why not, but again, best to check with Oracle. Eddie, Brett, any other comments?
I mean, it's simply we can't speak for them, Terry.
Yeah. From Willem on issue running VMS on desktop. Microsoft has a program to test whether Windows 11 will run on the system. Is it an idea to have something similar for OpenVMS? Also check whether security measures in UETP can be used.
Interesting question, and probably beyond my ability to answer that. I think as far as the latter part of that question is concerned, we are doing quite a bit of work in that space. In terms of the first part of the question around compatibility, you'll know pretty quickly. We do have, you know, there are tools you can run which will tell you whether the processor is capable of running OpenVMS, but we haven't put anything into the installation procedure at the moment to actually tell you that at the start. You'll just, you know, it just won't work once it tries booting the ISO. It's just not going to work. But possibly we could consider adding something there. It hasn't really been discussed.
Thanks, Brett. Once Deck Windows is ready, are there any plans to port VS Code to VMS?
There are. That has not been discussed. So the answer to that one at the moment would be a no. You know, it's not to say it's off the table. It just hasn't been discussed.
And Jim has a reminder. I must have missed something earlier. Don't forget about my LAT question. Driver loads, but LAT ACP dies.
So if this is a problem with the 9.1 or something like that, I mean, please ensure that the problem is reported.
Yes, but LAT is being made available on x86.
Correct. Yeah.
Here's a statement from Gerard, really talking about the Atom machine. It looks like talking about what I guess the market or individuals are saying about what the commercial value is of that. So thank you, Gerard. We'll take that to heart in this on this project. Mauricio, question in open source: will Samba be available for x86 VMS?
Yes, it will. Yeah. So I can't remember exactly which box that fitted into on the slides. We haven't actually commenced the porting work on that yet, Maurizio, but that will be starting towards, I think, the end of August. It's a fairly significant port. Samba is not a small piece of code, but we're not really foreseeing too many issues with that. There's, you know, it's fairly standard C code. There just happens to be a lot of it. But most definitely it will be available. Yeah. Okay,
well, I don't see any additional questions, and plus we have run over a bit, but for Brett and Eddie, we want to thank all of our participants today. We've tried to answer your questions as best as possible. We have noted a few that we were not able to answer, and we will endeavor to get back to you individually. If you don't hear from us within the next few days, please reach out to us. This is Terry Holmes. You can reach out to me or reach out to sales@vmssoftware.com or info@vmssoftware.com. Again, just to note for our panelists, Brett, Eddie, just so you know, from the numbers that we started with, we still have about 75–80% of the people who have stayed on this entire time. So tremendous interest in Brett, your presentation and in answering questions. So terrific. Thank you again. We appreciate it. Look forward to webinar number 16 as a continuing series on x86, which will probably be in the late September or early October timeframe. And we thank you very much for your participation. Brett, again, thank you for getting up in the middle of the night and presenting. This is very informative. And everyone have a great rest of your day wherever you are in the world. And thanks again. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye now.